understand it because I don't. It's not in me to do that. And I'm so competitive, and I know he is too. It's a really hard thing for me to understand why, but it's really not for me to understand why. I just want him to be happy.
Now, back to Steiny and Guru on 95.7 The Game.
All right, Matt Steinmetz, Darryl the Guru Johnson with you on 95.7 The Game. And that was the voice of Joe Lacob, owner of the Golden State Warriors from yesterday. And let's welcome in Monte Poole, NBC Sports Bay Area. He covers the Golden State Warriors. Monte, thank you as always for joining us. And this is kind of an easy one because, it's what we'll ask of everybody. What were some of your takeaways from yesterday?
Well, let's begin with the fact that it wasn't a surprise. When Bob entered his walk year a year ago, you kind of figured, okay, what's going to happen here? And we all know that there were lots of guys lobbying for him to stick around. Steve Kerr, Steph Curry, Draymond Green, Klay Thompson. They all treasure Bob and understand his value to the franchise, which goes beyond building a roster. But Bob never really wavered. You could see he was thinking about it, and every now and then I'd ask him about it, and he would just kind of brush it off. And the last time I asked him about it was in Sacramento during that playoff series, and I said, Bob, you really can't quit on these guys, right? And he laughed really loud. So, but I understand why, and I think they all understand why too. When you work directly under a guy like Joe Lacob, this guy's ambition runs around the clock, every day, every week, every year. And so, and Joe joked sort of when he said that he calls Bob 5 to 20 times a day. I think that's no exaggeration. And so think about that, someone who calls you that often, every day, all year. And then Bob joked about waking up at 3 a.m, and sometimes those wake-ups were not because his alarm was going off. So at some point, if you're Bob, you played ball at UCLA, you went straight from there to law school, you worked for a firm and represented NBA players, you left there and came straight to the Warriors. It's like he's been pedaling uphill up the upward mobility his entire life, and he's never had a chance to take a breath. And I've always said, as the months wound down, that if Bob leaves, it won't be because of money. And I believe that. I believe that money is not why he's leaving. I think he really wants to just take a step back and sort of assess where he is in life without the daily grind of basketball, being a basketball GM. And it is a grind.
Yeah, Monty, I'm with you. I was telling Steiny, because all I do at this job is just share my thoughts, and I'm not sitting here telling you I know everything because I have no sources, but I thought this was about maybe Joe Lacob passing this job down to his son, and maybe Bob saw the handwriting on the wall. But Monty, I was totally wrong. With that said, you got Draymond Green, his decision. You got Klay coming up with a new contract. You got do you trade Kuminga, Jordan, Poole? Monty, there are a lot of questions. Can Poole and Dre coexist? What word would you use to describe for the new GM taking over for the Warriors what he's facing? Well, there's that laugh, boy.
Well, it's not a catastrophe because, as long as you have Wardell, Steph, and Curry, there is hope. But it is an extreme challenge because, people look at the quote-unquote two-timeline situation of last season, and it wasn't like Bob Myers walked into Joe and said, Joe, it's time. We need to go with the young guys and with, around the core. That's not really what happened. It was more like the other way around. Joe looked at the payroll and said, whoa, let's try and make some usage of these young guys that we revamped our player development staff. What are they doing if you can't get these young guys ready? Let's see how that works. And then we saw the results of it, and it didn't work so well. And we don't know if it would have worked better or not, but we all know that there was a cloud over the season from the moment Draymond landed on Jordan. Draymond hit Jordan. And it never really went away. They existed okay on the court, but the chemistry wasn't the same. And Draymond admitted it, that situation definitely fractured his ability to lead. And, he couldn't leave in his normal way. And everybody felt that. Everybody sensed that. And think about this, too. If you're a young guy, and the Warriors have plenty of young guys on that roster, and you see that, and you're told that Draymond is your leader, and you see that, what's going through your mind? So the general manager who comes in, whether it's Mike Dunleavy or someone else, has a lot to deal with in terms of just not in terms of rebuilding the roster, reshaping the roster, but in terms of what he has on his plate already. Jordan's contract kicks in next season, and so does Andrew Wiggins has a contract that will kick in soon. So you've got that to deal with. Steph is the only one under contract beyond next season of either Steph, Draymond, and Clay. So he has to decide, whoever it is, and it won't be a one-person decision. It never is. Bob Myers wasn't in there making all the decisions. It really is a group, and they try to reach a consensus. They don't always, and the last vote goes to the CEO. But if you're the general manager who takes this job, you got to know that it is a time of transition. The Warriors on-court product has been a product mostly of 5 people the past 8 or 9 years. Bob Myers, Steve Kerr, Steph Curry, Draymond Green, and Klay Thompson. And Myers is the first one to leave. And you don't know how much that pillar of going away will affect the other 4. But I got to think it's going to affect them to some degree because they all really admire Bob. They cherish Bob, and they understand his value beyond, like I said, beyond what a normal GM does. His way with dealing with problems, his way of mediating things with everybody in the organization, top to bottom. And I don't know if they have anybody in the building who can do that with the same sort of skill that Bob does. And so it's going to be a challenge. Mike Dunleavy may know basketball. Bob said yesterday that Mike knows basketball better than he does. He might be right, but I don't think Mike Dunleavy knows people as well as Bob does. And as a general manager in that franchise, when you look at the way they operate, getting, I don't want to say close to people, but understanding people is an important part of your job. I guess you would say your job skill that's needed for that job. So it's going to be tough for the new guy, whoever it is.
Monte Poole joining us on 95.7 The Game. He covers the Warriors for NBC Sports Bay Area. Boy, I have 2 places I want to go. One is I'll just go with Steve Kerr. He's got only 1 more year left. Do you think he's going to sign an extension this summer?
I would be a little bit surprised if he does. I honestly don't. I'm not sure. Whenever I talked to Steve this season about Bob's situation, he always made it clear that he really wanted Bob to stick around and dreaded the possibility of not having him around. Now, that doesn't mean he's going to quit, that he's going to take his 1 year and bounce. But if he decides to go long term, obviously that means that something has changed and he feels better about the way things are because he and Bob are so close and they've done so many things together. They've really been the 2 guys who've kind of put this thing together in terms of the way, not just the roster, but the way the game is played. And so, and Bob has been Steve's sounding board for many, many reasons, many times. And in some cases, Bob is the mediator between Steve and Joe. So that part of the job is something that I got to try to get a feel on how Steve feels about where things are without Bob. And I think that would be the determining factor. But I would be at this point, based on what I've felt so far in the past 6-7 months, I'd be a little surprised if he signs an extension this summer. And I wouldn't be surprised if he says, you know what, let's just go into the season and see how it goes. I wouldn't be surprised at all.
Monty, I'm still dealing with the loss to the Lakers, but also the metamorphosis going the wrong way for Jordan Poole as opposed to last year to this year. With that said, what's your gut tell you? Do you think he'll be in a Warrior uniform next year, or could he be traded?
Oh, he could be traded. He could be traded. The question is, what are you going to get for him? And it's hard to gauge Jordan. I think if you're another team and you like Jordan's game, you can say, you know what, this year was kind of an aberration. Y'all know what happened preseason. And this year he just struggled mentally and emotionally maybe. And maybe, we'll get the Jordan we saw the previous year when they won a championship. That Jordan was pretty good. And I think there are teams out there who will look at it that way and be open to a deal. The question is, what are the Warriors going to get back? Because the reason why they like Jordan and paid him, well, there are a couple of reasons why they paid him, but the reason why they like him is because they see him as the kind of dynamic combo guard. He's not Steph, but they understand that he's a guy who can both score and create. His defense obviously is not very good, but neither was Steph when he came in the league. So I think they would definitely entertain a trade for Jordan just because there is some uncertainty now about where he's headed after this past season.
Monte Poole joining us on 95.7 The Game. He covers the Warriors for NBC Sports Bay Area. Monte, you and I have been around for a little while, and when Mike Dunleavy was a player here, I think there was more acrimony between Dunleavy and the fan base than almost any other player I've seen come through here. Does that matter at all if he takes over for Bob Myers?
That's an interesting. I think you're right. I think you're right, but that's an interesting observation because because he's been in sort of a shadow GM for a couple of years now, 3 years. He's low profile.
Right.
He doesn't do much. He doesn't do many interviews. He hasn't been out there. But part of that is who he is. Mike Dunleavy has never been a guy who, is always open and accessible to all parties. He's a little bit more cloistered than Bob is. And so I think if you're a Warriors fan, you hope that, Bob is rubbed off on Mike and trust that will be enough. If Mike gets the job, that will be enough to keep the Warriors rolling. After all, we heard Joe Lacob say yesterday that we're going to win. We're going to do what it takes to win. We're not going to stop. We're a machine, baby. We're a machine. Right. So, but if you look at what Mike has done so far, he's already been doing some GM stuff, and I think that if the team does okay, that fans will be willing to let bygones be bygones. Right. Because let's admit it, some of these fans don't know Mike who played for the Warriors.
No doubt.
Younger generation. And they don't know that Mike. And so we all know that when he left, it was not a comfortable parting. He was getting booed at home games.
Yeah.
But again, I think a lot of fans who've come onto the scene in the past 10 years, they don't know that. They weren't around for that. They didn't experience that, so they don't know any better.
Monte, let me share something with you. Steiny and I have been rocking together for 6 years, man, and for 6 years.
That's a long time.
Yeah, we've been.
How do you guys do it?
Man, I'll tell you about it over a couple beers, Monte. And he's always been telling me about this Coach Spo, Pat Riley, and the Heat culture. And he's been right, but it's never been more apparent to me now when I'm watching Strus, Vincent, and Caleb Martin. And Monte, I know every team is different, but I keep thinking about Kuminga, Moody, and Wiseman. And I know the Warriors have had success, but that's okay for a Warrior fan to be like, you know what? Why didn't our youngsters get it when I'm watching the other lesser youngsters contribute on a bigger stage?
I'll give you a couple reasons. You go back and look at the college careers of those guys. These aren't guys who came into the league at 19.
Yep.
Caleb Martin played 4 years. These guys all stuck around their colleges for 3 and 4 years. Tyler Hero, I think, was only a 2-year guy maybe, but most of these guys stuck around for 3 or 4 years, and so they came into the NBA at 21, 22, 23 years old. And so now they're 24, 25, 26 years old. And it's so different. The attitude is so different when you draft a guy, when you bring a guy in who's undrafted, who just wants to make it in the league. He comes with a different attitude than a guy who's a lottery pick. It's a different vibe.
No doubt.
And so you look at to me, that was one of the biggest differences between last year's team and this year's team is that the guys on the bench last year, most of those guys were either trying to prove they belonged in the league, still belonged in the league, like Otto Porter Jr., Bill Itza, Damian Lee, or trying to prove they could stay in the league, like Juan Toscano Anderson and Damian Lee and Gary Payton II. In other words, those guys were all dogs. They went every single day was an observation for them, a chance for them to prove they belonged in the NBA, or like I said, in the case of Otto, still belonged in the NBA after a bunch of empty seasons.
Yeah.
When you come into the league as a teenage lottery pick, it's not the same sort of approach. It's a different mentality, man.
No doubt. I mean, the Warriors
culture, and you look at that mentality, and you got what you're seeing right now with that team.
I mean, the Warriors, Max Strus and Caleb Martin are Ty Jerome and Anthony Lamb, essentially. You know what I mean?
In some ways.
Yeah. Hey, Monte, great stuff.
Thank you, man.
Should be a wild off season. Thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it, and hopefully we'll talk to you soon.
All right, fellas, take care.